If you
Of
see
all
me
the things you could do, the first thing that comes to mind is I can get a burger whenever I want.
yeah,
That's
I mean,
freedom. Yeah.
3 a.m. in
Very
the morning,
wholesome.
I want fries. I'm gonna get myself fries. I ain't gonna wait for someone to wake up to, you know, bring me fries or get me to the fries. I'm gonna walk out and get me some fries.
Hi, everyone. You're listening to Village
Village
Kids,
Kids.
a podcast hosted by four childhood best friends. I'm Annika,
I'm Erin.
Julia.
Hey, Marga.
and this episode we'll be talking about independence. We're at around the age when the topic of independence comes up a lot in our decision making, big or small. And yeah, in our case, we're talking about it in the context of independence in terms of moving away from our families. And so that's not something that I've personally experienced. So I'll be moderating this conversation. And that's something that everyone else here I know has a lot of opinions about. And specifically, I think in this year, you moved a lot. And by a lot, I mean like more than once each. First things first, I guess, what were all of your experiences moving?
I think for the three of us, the first instance was moving for college.
Yeah.
Because
I
the
was gonna
three of us
say.
went to college in Manila. But I'd say it's a different kind of independence.
Because you still feel dependent. Because technically,
yeah.
you're
Mm.
not working. You're just moving away, maybe from like your high school friends as well as your parents. But there was always that. Well, especially outside of COVID, there was always that eventual going back home. So you always had that comfort. Like if you wanted to go home for a long weekend, or if you wanted to visit relatives for a birthday or a wedding, it was so easy. So definitely, I think moving away before, it wasn't too heavy. Whereas I think moving in the last year was also quite a whole nother feeling, I think, for all of us. Yeah.
I'd say it was an easier transition because, like, since we already felt the kind of partial independence going into college, it's like being more independent in the sense like financially independent or whatever. It was easier.
So for me naman, now I feel like I'm not independent still because I'm still at the house. But like same with Air, like kind of financially dependent in a way that okay, wait, I don't have bills to pay really, just my credit card. Oh, this is a whole nother topic na like
Wow, I didn't even think about financial independence, but that's
it's just
yeah. Maybe we should have started with what are your definitions of independence?
I'm so
Yeah.
sorry. I opened that Pandora's box.
No, but definitely, I think I think Annika's right. Like there are definitely different levels of independence, and I think depending on where you are in your life, you're able to unlock those levels. I guess like for me, I think when I was in college, I didn't think I was gonna, support myself till I was outside of school. And I didn't even know that was gonna be right after school. Because similar to Annika, I wanted to go into a different path, like wherein I would continue on school for like however longer.
For context, I think that we're really privileged to be able to go to school and not have to worry about where to get money for tuition or for our living expenses. Like having our parents subsidize our college, basically, it's a really big privilege, and like I acknowledge that, and I'm very grateful for it.
I think it's really good that you're bringing in context into this because it's not so much like an expectation put on students to work alongside school. So that limits like I guess the definition of financial independence.
I
Yeah.
think also on that level, you can kind of shoot it back to Annika and how technically her living in Canada, it's so different, right? You have to be a lot more independent. I think really early on, like in regards to taking public transportation, it's so different, your lifestyle there as opposed to being in the Philippines. And I think that was something that when I was in school, it was kind of foreign because of course you'd have chores, but it's completely different not having the extra help in the house.
Yeah, wow, that's a whole other direction to take it in as well. Yeah. I think oftentimes we think of independence, like I think of it now, I guess from the lens of like the life stage that I'm in, that independence is equated to living alone. But like as you brought up earlier, Margie, it's third degrees to it. Only like really reflected on this recently that um after staying in the Philippines for 6 months, did I realize that oftentimes when I'm there, I'm never ever really on my own or doing anything alone. Like you don't just decide that you want to walk out of the house and go do something and just walk to the mall. That's not commonplace. But when I moved here, suddenly that was an option that I could just leave the house whenever I wanted if I felt like grabbing a snack or doing anything. And that's really liberating, I guess, in a way. I don't have to tell anyone where I am. I can just freely do this. And it's scary, I think, at first, coming from an environment where that wasn't the norm and always feeling skeptical about my safety. But yeah, it takes time to get used to, but it can also be something empowering. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what about you guys? Like how has independence presented itself in your life? And in what way has it impacted you?
I feel like pretty much the same as yours, Anna. 'Cause, like when I went to college, I started out in the dorm, and then after the first year, I moved into a condo and stayed with two of my close friends from high school. And basically, when that happened, it's like I had even more freedom than when living in the dorm because like no curfews. I could go wherever, whenever I wanted. And I think as the youngest, we're all the youngest here, but I think for my
Yeah.
case, as the youngest in my family, I think my parents were a lot more chill with me. Like they'd ask me about like what I'm doing and stuff, and I'd honestly tell them, I'd be like, okay, I'm going out this weekend, and then they'd just be okay, just be careful, or like just make sure that you're with trusted friends or whatever. But I'm like, if they don't ask me, it's just I can go wherever I want to. Not that I go anywhere dangerous, but like it's the idea that you could do anything you want whenever is, as you said, really liberating.
Yeah, I agree actually. I think for me, even when I was in the dorm, I felt quite liberated. I think I was in the dorm for maybe like 5 years. And in that time, you're just so go with the flow. Everyone's just going anywhere and everywhere. And you want to do an all-nighter like in McDonald's? Go. If you wanna go to Bo's Coffee and just like stay there for 36 hours straight, just it's happened.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And then I think as a very, very sheltered person, not gonna lie, first year, second year, Marga was just this is the life. Obviously it's so shallow in the sense of independence still. That was like really like baby independence for me. Just but that's how it was. Like I wasn't the type who could walk out of my house at 3 a.m. and get McDonald's when I was in Davao. And then when I was in Manila, maybe I shouldn't have. Maybe that's kind of dangerous, but I did sometimes because I was hungry.
I
I mean,
mean, Katipunan is still alive at that time, so
yeah, it is. It is. But I guess in the most superficial way of it, I felt independent because I just felt I made my own choices, and then it allowed me to learn from whatever repercussions there were that came resulted from that.
I feel like college in that sense is so fun because like you could do anything you wanted without having
Mm,
someone breathe down your back for it. Like
yeah.
honestly, if my parents are watching, I'm a CPA now, so you don't have to worry about it. But like back in college, whenever there was a class that was like kind of so, like you could just cut it whenever you want, and like you wouldn't get scolded for it, basically.
Yeah. I love
And
that
like
actually. Yeah.
and like it's up to you. It's like if you miss a class and you miss something because of it, like okay, that's on you and it's up to you to make up for it. Which I love the idea of. Like I've skipped classes to study for other classes that have like more
Yes.
units or whatever.
I love Julia. I feel like Julia's so ready to. I feel this on a molecular level.
I want to hear what Julia has to say about college.
I feel like she super relates to this. Don't worry, you're not alone.
In my experience, though, because okay, I am the most unathletic person you'll ever meet. So back in college, our our first period is fitness something. I don't know, but at 7:30, physical class, physical education. No. First of all, I'm a night owl and I'm super unathletic. Oh my gosh, I really couldn't. I think at one point I had to drop it and I had to take it again in another year. And I got an afternoon class, so that was the best idea. That was the best decision I've ever made.
It's like a training ground for what it's like to be in charge of your life with
Yeah.
like
It was so
rules
fun.
and
It really was.
parameters of somehow being held accountable, right? Whether it's your grades or your energy level or the number or fatigue and all of that. Yeah, I guess now my question would be, what do you wish you knew now about like living independently before you made the move?
In my case, when I moved for college to Manila, it wasn't really a big change because I think my dad was there every weekend. And my sister was the one who drove me. Everything was still spoon fed to me in the beginning. It really didn't feel like anything changed. It was just the location for me. During the time when I didn't have a driver earlier in college, I would drive myself. So maybe that was the only difference that I really felt from coming from Davao, moving to Manila. But that kind of scared me because driving in EDSA, okay, first of all, driving in the Philippines is a whole nother experience. But driving in Manila in EDSA is
I can't imagine.
I would have to call someone like a friend while I'm driving just to like I don't know, I feel safer when somebody knows what's happening.
What about when you started like kind of moving around? You set up a business, like all those different things. The independence that you've had is so multifaceted as well.
Because my course is entrepreneurial management, so it was necessary for me to follow through with my thesis in order to graduate. So our thesis is to put up a business, and they have like this. You have to earn this much money every month in order to graduate. So work smart, not harder. Whatever Aaron would say. So I opened mine back in Davao. I don't know. It was just so easy for me because there's a lot of people here that could help me run it. So I still didn't feel that independent when putting up my business because my dad was here to overlook it while I was still in Manila trying to graduate. I really didn't feel the independence back in uni, to be honest. Like, I feel like I started becoming independent more so during the pandemic. For context, I moved to our condo September of last year, I think. That's the only time where I felt like I took the baby steps to be independent. because I kind of learned, emphasis on learned to cook. I love cleaning, so that wasn't new to me.
Mm.
I love being alone, so I don't know. It was just wow. When I'm there, I'm so peaceful. Like I feel like I'm a different person. Like who is that Julia at home? I don't know her. What you guys felt during college was how I felt last year in September.
You're just gonna have more opportunities as soon as hopefully the pandemic, comes to a close, because you already know what you like, what it would feel like.
And now we're both moving again, Marky. How are you?
Yeah.
How's the move?
I think for me, what you described, I felt quite a few times in the last 8 months. I think this was my favorite just because I know it's gonna be for a longer time. So it's like it's an investment in itself, like the move. And I did feel that sort of peace today, this morning. Literally, I haven't built any furniture yet, so I just laid out a comforter on the floor and just put up pillows, and I was just like, this is life. I feel so at peace. And that's when I called up Erin and I was just like, you know what, let's just talk. Like I just feel so okay. And even though I hit myself this morning, I don't know if the sugat is clear, but I wounded myself this morning, and I just feel so unfazed by everything. There are just going to be so many different bumps in the road, but I'm so happy to just kind of appreciate the little things. I learned quite a bit to be a person outside of the people who take care of me. I just found out more about myself. I think I was so scared of being alone. Sometimes I was scared of wanting independence because I felt like it would equate to me being lonely. And I wouldn't lie to you guys and say that, oh, I haven't felt lonely. Obviously, you guys know I've been lonely so many periods of this pandemic. But I think I became less dependent on physical presence and more about the actual relationships and then appreciating them, and then knowing that even if I'm physically alone, I'm not necessarily alone in this world. So yeah, so a lot of reflection in this independence of moving.
I feel
Just
like for
correct.
Marga specifically, like Marga and Julia, like independence is like a whole other discussion when put in the context of COVID. Because like you're not just dealing with independence, you're also dealing with isolation and a lot of fears and anxiety of COVID itself. Bottom line is trying to be a young adult in this COVID world is tough.
For me,
I
I
agree.
I'm alone.
I feel like Julia craved it for so long that now that she finally has it, she's like, I'm free! Like me and Marga in college.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. You can be independent, like you can feel your independence, but also still know that you can come home. I think, like, for example, Erin, you mentioned you came home. It doesn't mean that that means that your independence went away, but rather, like, you are able to also separate your independence from like being in family. And I think that's something that I looked for as well, especially during the pandemic. I think we all looked for support in different places, and I was so lucky I had relatives to lean on when I knew it wasn't the right time to be completely isolated from people. And yeah, I feel like that's a whole nother layer as well.
Going back to Annika's question though, like what do we wish we knew about
Oh
living
my god.
independently before we made the move? Going back to that question, I feel like for me, I am happy that I went into it not knowing what I do now, because part of taking like the baby steps in college and then after college finally trying to bring in some more independence for myself, it's like the fact that I took those baby steps didn't make it hard at all. It was a fun learning process. And I feel like honestly, a lot of the things that I learned came from the friends that I made there. It's like a share your tips and I'll share my tips kind of thing. And it was just generally a really fun time trying to figure things out by yourself.
I agree with Erin. Like the learning experience was fun.
I think
Yeah.
for our parents too, it's like from their point of view, college was like the first step of them letting go of us. So like they're still there and they're still very much present, but they're not like physically present. And I feel like such a necessary step for them to just not to feel so burdened by the sudden absence.
Yeah. And I think like something important from like what you mentioned about how the community that you were in, because definitely like entering college and even entering the workforce, you're doing it with hopefully like people who you can lean on as well. And then like for example your friends sharing tips, like all of those things, sometimes you didn't know about those things going into college. I learned how to um plancha my clothes literally in the dorm. I learned how to save. I think that's a huge thing that we kind of missed out on, saving. When you're not financially independent, you still are independent, but then in different ways. And then you have to learn how to be more frugal with your money. That's a whole nother thing. I mean, you have to learn to live within your means and not being able to necessarily go to your parents' room the next night and like ask, "Oh, I ran out of money. Can you lend me?" Yeah, so same. I don't think I knew anything or I knew what I was getting into going into it, but I'm glad we got out of whatever we got into with less battle scars.
I feel like from a practical perspective, on the other hand, like there are a lot of things that you have to take note of when you're going to live independently. So like for me, moving from college to working in Manila, I didn't actually move places, but the dynamic kind of changed. I told my parents that I wanted to pay for things by myself, stuff like that. So financial independence and stuff. So I feel like there are a lot of practical things that you need to take care of, like rent, utilities, electricity, and then all the little things too, like Wi-Fi, appliances. I don't know, like there are
Mm.
so many aspects to living away from home. What do you think, Mark? You signed your own lease just a few weeks ago.
Yeah, like last week, a few days ago, yeah. I think for me, definitely, I think it was also very liberating in the sense that, even these last few months, actually, where I was earlier, in the pandemic, I was actually sharing a unit with a college best friend, and the reason why I did that was because I was so scared of the investment of effort, time, and just having to think about signing your own lease and being committed to a place for like 6 months to a year. I was just so scared of that because I was like, how do I know whether I'm going to be staying in this job for that however long? And I was just not ready to make that big step. But I agree. I think it's really good to start with baby steps. So for me, if you can try and share your first unit, or if you're going to rent a place, try feeling it out first with someone. Maybe you can save money. I think that was really good for me because, as I mentioned, entry level paying job, I had to work to not necessarily deprive myself of food. Okay, so here's the thing. I love Starbucks. I love Tim Hortons. I love being able to eat food. But I mean, sometimes I have pancit canton, I have samyang, like I can buy 7-Eleven food and mini stop fried chicken. But sometimes you want to order in no-nos and sometimes you want to go and have a good cup of coffee. So a lot of my growing up in the last how many months was really first knowing how much I need to spend in a month. I learned a lot from Erin and Julia, just the way that they handle their finances. I still have a long way to go, but definitely knowing how much you spend, where you can save, and um, just also taking care of yourself. I think something that I took into consideration with my first job is that it's okay to spend on yourself. Like, I wasn't too afraid to buy things because I felt, in this pandemic, being alone, I'm also wanting to think of my own mental health. So sometimes I would treat myself. Yeah, so it's still happening to me. Obviously, I'm still learning, and I'm I'm so lucky that I was able to also lean on people during the pandemic. And so my advice to people who are about to graduate would be definitely, stick to your community. Being independent doesn't mean that you have to do it all alone. I think that's my number one thing. You
Yeah.
can be independent and take care of yourself, but also know that you can stick with people. Of course, it's hard during the pandemic, but there are people who are also entering the workforce who may be looking for a place that is also nice that you might be able to save on. And it's not bad. It's basically like being in the dorm, but out in the real world. And yeah, and then you can save, meal prep. I haven't honestly done that, but a lot of my coworkers do that and they save quite a lot of money. So yeah, just learn to see what you want to do and how you want to save. Definitely saving is important, but take care of yourself and treat yourself when you can. Yeah, I think that's it. Those are my wisdoms. I've only been out in the workforce for how many months? So almost a year, but we'll see. We'll see. Maybe it'll be updated and better in a few months.
As a closing for me though, living independently for me is just a lot of figuring out how else I can be more independent.
Yeah.
My parents would not tell me that, oh, you should pay for this, this, this. It's like me telling them, like, I want to pay for this, this, and this. So it's like more of poking around and figuring out where else can I get more independence for myself. It's just a learning process. Until now, I'm still learning. Although at the moment I am back at home, but still a lot to learn about how to continue on with the independence despite being physically back at home.
Yeah. It's like a balancing act, being at home while also somewhat maintaining your own sense of independence.
Yeah.
It's also figuring out healthy boundaries. Because, like, honestly, already having had that independence in Manila and coming back home and suddenly feeling like it's not as full as it was, it's really just trying to figure out what works.
With that being said, as someone who has yet to get like a taste of like living independently, I feel like this whole conversation has been so enlightening. I feel like I could pick out any 10-second snippets from anything that you guys have said so far, and there were just so many like little gold nuggets in all of that. It's really been so interesting to listen to all of you talk about independence sort of in real time as we're all experiencing it, how that sort of comes in different shapes and forms, somewhat conventionally, somewhat unconventionally. And yeah, I think the whole idea of independence can mean different things for different people and at different points in their life. Full independence is something that is often romanticized. So I think this conversation has really debunked a lot. Like, that it's a lot of work and it's a lot of learning and growing and constant change and adapting to your situation, whether it's that you're living at home trying to find your own slice of independence, or whether you're fully out there and navigating what that might look like for yourself. Yeah, thank you all for listening. I hope you learned something from this. Till next time, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Village Kids.